think, hopefully that speaks well of me. So we were just, before those of you who just walked in, we were talking about that some of the stuff in this reading today was complicated. The one I think that catches people the most is this idea of what an account is. And just keep in mind with an account, it's a debt that's owed that comes around, that it arises from the sale of something or provision of services. So the example we were just talking about is the bar tab that you don't pay right away and you tell the bartender, I'll come back tomorrow and pay you back. That's an account. They sold you alcohol and you said you pay later. That's an account. So it's property that can be used as collateral in a loan. So, and part of this may also, that's a little bit confusing is the idea that we haven't talked about default and foreclosure yet. The fact that somebody has a security interest, we haven't talked about what that means in terms of executing on the security interest. That's later in the course. Right now we're just talking about, does the security interest even exist? Okay, so what I'm going to do, the first thing I want to mention is, I did not like how using the electronics works last time, so I'm going totally analog. I've got my books with me, 4 of them, 3 of them. So, just get your code out. That's going to be my answer. I was going back and forth, and things were shutting off, and that was just a complete waste of time. So I'm going analog. We need to finish up the problems in Chapter 2, and I think we got through problem 11, so we're going to work on problem 12. But instead of calling on you, I'm just going to work through them, so we can get through them quickly and then move on to the material for today. So, problem 12 asks about whether or not Article 9 applies to the pledge of, or the granting of an interest in all and present or future commissions. So, there's an exclusion in 9-109 D statute 9109 D3, wages, salary, or other compensation. What the case says, that's listed in the problem, is that commissions are not wages. So if commissions are not wages, what's the effect of the exclusion? Does not apply, right? So if it does not apply, does that make it an Article 9 transaction? Yes, right? So there's a consensual grant of a security interest in the commissions. That means that unless there's an exclusion that applies, it's covered by Article 9 because 9-109A1 says a contractual agreement to grant a security interest in property is subject to Article 9. And these commissions are granted by contract, so it's either an account or a general intangible. We'll talk about that when we get to the next chapter. Okay? So the exception, 9-109D3, which says Article 9 does not apply to an assignment of wages, commissions are not wages. So the exception does not apply, which means that Article 9 does apply to this transaction. Okay? That make sense? All right. That was 12. 13. So the subheading here is non-financing assignments. And we have art business. He not only sold all tangible assets, but the outstanding accounts receivable as well. Must the buyer take steps required by Article 9 of a secured party? What do you think? The answer is, I see a no, and the no is?
Because it's 9-109D4, whether sale of the accounts is part of the sale of the business, and therefore.
So, and let me explain the genesis of this. When a company is sold, and you're selling all of the assets of the business, right? So this is a sale of assets, not a sale of stock. So in the sale of the assets, you're selling everything. That's not really a financing kind of transaction. That's just a transfer over to someone new of all the assets. And so that's why there's an exclusion. So if it's The accounts are part of a business that's transferred over, not covered by Article 9 because of the exclusion. It is a sale of accounts, but the accounts are part of a sale of an entire business, not just the accounts by themselves. So the lesson to take from that is, if you see a question where the only thing that's transferred is a sale of accounts and nothing else transfers, it's an Article 9 transaction, right? Sale of accounts, 9-102A3, I think I'm writing that, right? 4 is consignments.
Oh,
No, that's all right. I said, so if you read a problem, if you're reading a problem and it says, Company A sold its accounts, and that's all that they sold, it's an Article 9 transaction. If you read a problem that says, Company A sold all of its assets to another company, not an Article 9 transaction because of the exception 9109D. Okay? Yeah.
What if they're just selling like business line?
Sorry?
What if they're selling like their accounting department or something that it's not, like it's bigger than just the accounts themselves, but it's not the entire business? I mean, I guess, does that depend?
It says, as part of the sale of a business out of which they arose. So I would say if it's a business unit, that sounds like the sale of a business. Yeah. The kinds of transactions that they're talking about are sales of accounts by themselves. If there are assets going along with them, like the machinery, the cars, the buildings, then it's probably a sale of a business. Can there be edge cases? Sure. I mean, I could write a fact pattern that was close, but those are the easy cases are only accounts, all assets. Yes, no. All right. All right. So then we move on. So that was 9109D6, right? No, sorry. I'm on the wrong problem. Okay. So he sold his art business, so D4. Then we move on to the next part of this. Received a commission to paint a portrait, but he said he was too busy, so he assigned the right to do the portrait to another artist. Covered by Article 9 or accepted from Article 9? So we look at D5, and it says assignment, D6, and we see it says if it's a contract to an assignee that is also obligated to perform under the contract. So this exception is basically they're assigning over their obligation to paint the painting. So it's not just the payment that's going, it's also the obligation to perform. So D6 is when you assign over your obligation to perform under the contract. So the this is a good example. Another good example would be, let's say somebody agrees to sing, do a performance at, the Kentucky Center. And then they say, you know what, I don't have time, so it's Miley Cyrus. She then assigns the obligation to, who would she assign it to?
Lizzo.
Okay, sounds good. I don't know who that is. That's how out of touch I am. If you had said something like BTS, I would know that. Does everybody know who BTS is? No? You're not all aficionados of K-pop?
No.
Hyuna? I know all this because my daughters listen to this stuff. Constant. K-pop is my life right now. So they transfers the obligation to perform over to another artist. The artist then has to do the singing, excluded. That makes sense? So the artist transfers the obligation, the right to receive the payment, and the obligation to perform to paint the painting, not an Article 9 transaction. Singer transfers the obligation to another singer. That's right, they have a right to receive the money, but they also have to sing the concert, perform in the concert, not an Article 9 transaction. All right? And then the last part of this, it says, assigned over to trash collection agency. Article 9 transaction? No. Once again, excluded. You're nodding your head, right? Take a look at the assignment for purposes of collection. That's 9109D5. So if the assignment is to a company who is going to collect on the bill, so a collection agency, then it's not an Article 9 transaction. Questions about that problem? The way you would do the analysis is to say it could be included under 9109A, but it is excluded because of 9109D. It could be included because it is the transfer of an account, and sale of accounts is covered by 9109A, but specific kinds of transfers of accounts are not, because they're excluded under 9109D. Okay? That would be the analysis chain that I would do. 9109A, covered, sale of an account, unless 9109D5, transfer for collection, not covered. That's excluded. So no Article 9 work needs to be done by the collection agency. They don't need to file anything. Okay? A lot of nodding heads. I hope we're good on this.
Oh, sir, I think
Yep.
there's another part on the bottom where Vargo transferred the store the money due from another client.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
No, you're right. I just wanted to make sure that we had gotten that one.
Oh, my
No,
bad.
you're
Oh.
fine. So,
Hey.
and the answer to D7 is to this situation is D7.
Okay.
Single account, not covered. So all of these are the D5, 6, and 7. 4, 5, 6, and 7. Good? Covered under A, but not covered because D excludes them. That's the way the analysis works. Problem 14. So let me just, if I were charting it out, I would not because we don't have any. So local loan company needs money, they go to ONB, and we have a couple of transfers, right? What does ONB transfer? Money. What does LLC transfer? A security interest in?
Accounts?
Well, are they accounts? What are they?
Oh, sorry.
What's the trick here with this problem? Normally real estate isn't covered, right? D11, I think, right? But is this a transaction involving real estate? Or is it involving something else? What are they transferring?
Chattel paper?
No, it can't be chattel paper because it's not personal property. They're transferring promissory notes that go with mortgages, right? What is a promissory note? Is an instrument subject to Article 9? Is it personal property? Can you get a security interest in personal property that is an instrument? Are these mortgages covered by Article 9? Yes. The trick here is what's being sold is not an interest in real estate. It's an interest in a loan about real estate. So it's a transfer of a promissory note that also has a mortgage attached. No question about it. That's a real estate transaction. The real estate transaction is not covered, but the notes are instruments, and instruments are collateral under Article 9. Now, take a look at comment. Official comment 7. So the example they give here is O borrows from M and secures it to repay its repayment obligation by a mortgage. This article does not apply to the creation of real property mortgage. Completely consistent with this. So that's the first part of this hypo in comment 7. However, if M sells the promissory note to X or gives a security interest in the note to secure M's own obligation to X, this article applies to the security interest thereby created in favor of X. Okay, so just make sure you understand what this transaction is. It says mortgages, and you go immediately, D11 not covered. Except, it's not mortgages that are, it's not a security interest in the real estate that's being created. It's the sale of a promissory note that is also part of a mortgage transaction. That is an instrument that is covered by Article 9, not excluded under D11. Keep reading the comment. What's the next thing that it says? The security interest in the promissory note is covered by this article even though the note is secured by a real property mortgage. Also, security interest in the note gives X an attached security interest in the mortgage lien that secures the note. And if the security interest in the note is perfected, the security interest in the mortgage lien likewise is perfected. Okay. So, we can't just say all transactions related to real estate are excluded. We have to ask, what is the nature of the transaction? If the nature of the transaction is the creation of a security interest in real estate, that's a mortgage, and that's real property law, and that's excluded. If the security interest is in the documents related to the creation of that mortgage, a promissory note, for example, then it is an Article 9 transaction. No, because I did it extemporaneously, and it will never be exactly the same. Let's divide, let's look at the mortgage transaction. How do you create a mortgage? So, A owns a home, right? And we'll say O and B is the bank, right? They need money. They go to O and B and say, give us money. O and B says, great, here's money. The only thing that A owns is of any value is a house, right? So they give a security interest called a mortgage to O and B. Plus they sign a promissory. Okay? Is this covered by Article 9? I just said it. No! I'm not making fun of you. I understand this is complicated. Please, I totally get that. The creation of the security interest in the real estate is a real estate transaction is excluded under 9109 D11. Okay, but O and B says, I want the cash. I don't want the mortgage note. I don't want 30 years of payments. I want cash today. So O and B makes a deal with First National Bank, and they transfer the mortgage over. So what goes back is money, and what goes over is the promissory note and mortgage. Is that an Article 9 transaction? Yes. So there's two transactions. This is the real estate transaction. This is the Article 9 transaction. Okay? Does that help? Article 9 transaction, not excluded, even though the underlying asset deals with real estate. But the asset itself that we care about is the promise to pay money that is secured by a mortgage. So that makes it an Article 9 transaction. Yes?
So if A defaults and then F and B decides to foreclose, then they get to jump to the front of the line.
Well, so that's a really great question.
'Cause
In your real estate class, in your property class, did you study foreclosure?
Yeah.
Who gets to foreclose on a mortgage?
Person with the note?
Person with the note. The right to foreclose follows the note. Who owns the note now?
F and B.
FNB can foreclose. But that makes sense, right? FNB is the party that's out the money that's secured by the real estate. So FNB should be. But FNB, O&B cannot foreclose because they don't own the loan anymore. FNB owns the loan, so they foreclose. That's a real estate question. I will never test you on that. Promise you, I will never test you on that. But that is the benefit. Sorry, let me say, I will never test you on the process of FNB foreclosing on A. I don't care that you know that. That's a real estate question. You do need to know that the right to foreclose transfers under the Article 9 transaction. Okay? Now, you don't know this yet. Does FNB have to file any paperwork to make sure that no other creditor can jump ahead of them? No. what is a promissory note? In the next chapter, the book calls it quasi-tangible property. The piece of paper, the possession of the piece of paper is the perfection of the paper. But that also makes sense because who is the party that's allowed to foreclose? The person who has the promissory note. So there's no harm, no foul, right? Why create a filing burden that's unnecessary? Because only the party that owns the note can foreclose. Okay? Okay, good. I'm so glad this is obvious to all of you. I see nervous looks out there. I get it. This is the hardest stuff, right, that we're doing right now. But is something a good? That's going to be easy. Is something an instrument that deals with the real estate? Now you've got to worry about D11, right? Okay. That was 14, right? So problem 15. O&B issued Connie a consumer credit card as collateral for the credit card debts. O&B just took a security interest in all items she purchased under the card. We're going to put that aside for the moment, as well as her personal checking account. Does Article 9 apply to the bank's rights in this account? Now, this account is the bank account. And they cite you to 9109D13. What does that say? An assignment of a deposit account in a consumer transaction. Does Article 9 apply to the assignment of a deposit account for a consumer? No, it does not. That's what D13 is saying. If a consumer tries to grant a security interest in their deposit account, bank account, to the bank, that is not an Article 9 transaction. It is excluded under 9109D13. What if she pledges it to secure repayment of a business loan? So it's her personal account, but she transfers it for purposes of securing repayment of a business loan. Is it included? Is that an Article 9 transaction? Well, let's take a look at 9109. D13. Is that a consumer transaction that I just described? Would Article 9 apply if she used her consumer bank account as collateral for a business loan? Is a business loan a consumer transaction?
No.
So Article 9 does apply. It's not excluded by 9109D13. So if a consumer in a consumer transaction tries to create a security interest in their bank account, not an Article 9 transaction. If a consumer in a business transaction tries to create a security interest in their personal account, it is covered by Article 9. It's not excluded. So again, the way you should do this is 9109A, is it covered? Yes, unless 9109D. That's the way you should do the analysis. Broadly covered under A may be excluded as a specific exclusion under D. Problem 16. So let's just jump to 9109D9. Are judgments excluded? So an assignment of a judgment is excluded. Is this an assignment of a judgment?
It was a settlement,
And what is a settlement?
not a judgment.
It's a contract,
Okay.
right? Is a settled agreement a contract?
Yes.
Can you assign contracts?
Yes.
Are contract assignments covered by Article 9? Yes, they're not excluded. So the judgment cannot be assigned as an under Article 9 does not apply to the assignment of the judgment. Article 9 does apply to the assignment of the settlement. What kind of collateral is the settlement? Does the paper is what's written on the paper legally operative with a contract?
Yes.
Sort of. It's not an instrument. It's not that kind of thing. Is a settlement agreement a promissory note? There could be a promissory note included, but if there isn't one, is the settlement agreement a promissory note? No. It's a contract right. Is there a sale of goods or services associated with that obligation? I think it's a general intangible, probably a payment intangible. Okay? The contract right is probably a general intangible. We're done with this chapter. Questions about this chapter? So this is the scope chapter. Does Article 9 apply to the transaction? That's all we're talking about in this case. We're not asking what the following issues are. Does Article 9 apply? 9-109. 9-109 is the scope. Questions? Nervous, but feeling good about it, right? So I just read somewhere about the psychology of learning that the assumption that it's easy makes it more likely you won't understand. So the fact that you're sitting there and going, my brain hurts, actually probably means you're doing something right, and you're probably more likely to learn it. So I'm not telling you this is easy. This is not easy. This statute is complicated. I agree. But I think if you work through it, we'll get to a point at the end of the semester where you'll hopefully, if you work the problems, you'll do it. Okay, let's move on to the material for today. So for today, we're in Chapter 4, and Chapter 4 covers creation of the security interest, and there's 3 lectures we're going to talk about creation of the security interest. And the 3 parts that we're going to look at are, 1, what is the collateral? 2, how do you create, what documents are necessary to create a perfected security interest in the collateral? And 3, when does that happen? Attachment is when it happens. That's the last of the 3 parts of this. Next week, we're going to talk about the paperwork, except for one part, which will be the description of the collateral. And today, all we're talking about is what is the collateral. Okay? That's it. What part of Article 9 covers figuring out what the collateral is? What section of the book did you mostly look at?
It's 9-102.
It's all definitional, right? So all we're looking at is the characterizing of the collateral is defined by 9102 mostly, although there are a couple of times we have to go to other sections. We'll see that. Okay. All we care about today is what is it? What is the personal property that's covered by the security? We're going to do all the other stuff later. The book divides the collateral into what they hope for you is a helpful way to distinguish the different groupings of collateral: goods, quasi-tangibles, and intangibles. There's nothing in the statute that does this grouping. This is intended to help you. If it doesn't help you, don't use it. But let me just take 2 minutes. Goods, I think, is self-explanatory. Quasi-tangible and intangible. Let's start with intangible. The concept behind the group called intangibles is that there's nothing physical at all that defines the property right. There's not a document that tells you what the property right is, right? Again, goods we're not talking about. So the first thing is intangibles are literally things that have no physical form, and yet they still are property. And we've already seen one of these, and that's copyrights. Copyrights are general intangibles. You can't touch a copyright. The registration certificate issued by the federal government has no legal effect as to your ownership interest, except in a lawsuit. It doesn't define your right. Even a patent, which is a piece of paper issued by the federal government, the document itself is just a confirmation that the right was granted to you. It's not the right itself. The person who possesses that certificate from the patent office, they're not the owner of the patent just because they have that piece of paper. It's what the records at the patent office say are the owners, and that's right. If it's been transferred, that's fine. But that paper, possessing that paper doesn't give you anything. The middle category. The paper that you get represents the property right. So in my discussion, I said, hey, if you got a ream of paper, what is it? It's either inventory at Staples, or it's personal property, it's consumer goods at your house, or here at the university, it's equipment. Probably inventory because of the definition of inventory. Okay? But there's nothing written on it, so we don't care. In a similar vein, a contract that is written out, that is, I agree to work for the university for 10 years and get paid, right? That contract, while it represents the understanding between the parties, it's the understanding that's important, not the paper, right? The university can't transfer me to UK by handing over my employment contract. I mean, what a dumb idea, right? But there are situations where the paper does represent the property right. Stock certificates. If you have a certificated stock certificate that says, the example I had in the hypo was Microsoft, right? So you have a piece of paper that says 100 shares in Microsoft, and you transfer that piece of paper to somebody else, you actually endorse the back of that piece of paper and hand it over to the new owner. So the transfer of ownership goes with that piece of paper. And that's the distinction that the book is trying to make. Now, I provided you with a second way to think about these different things, and that was about monetary obligations. So I had a lecture on that. Whatever works for you is fine. Sometimes it's just easier, read the definition, right? Forget about all the other noise. Which specific definition does it fall under? That works too, okay? The book is just trying to help you put things into categories so they make sense. If it's tripping you up, I absolutely advise you to ignore it. Do what works, okay? So if their grouping helps, great. If their grouping confuses you, ignore it. Okay? I don't know, that's a good question. Why are they laughing? Why are we listening to it?
Thank you for shutting the door.
Okay, so let's work the problem. So what I would do, I'm not going to call on one person to do all of the first problem. That would just be cruel, right? So why don't we just, together, work through the first problem, and I'm just going to call on one person to answer one blank, okay? And I'm just going to start here and work back, all right? So we're going to start in this section today. So I'm going to ask you the very first blank, a professional pianist piano.
It's equipment because it's not personal use if they're professional pianists.
Right, so you jumped over one thing. Of the three categories of the groupings, it's goods, right? Because it's a movable object. It's a physical thing that's not attached to the building. Okay, so it's a good, and then you said, but it's got to be one of the four subcategories. Why did you pick equipment? Because that's the catch-all, right?
Yeah, because it's not being used for personal use, so it wouldn't be a consumer good. So I said equipment because it's like part of her profession and part of her business.
Yeah, and I just want to make sure you're looking at the comments. If you look at the definition of, I believe it's, if you look at the 4th paragraph in comment 4A, I don't know what page it is for you, but comment 4A, 29102. There's the discussion of the distinction between inventory and equipment. And how long does a piano last?
A while, I would say.
Okay, so for this situation, equipment clearly is the right definition, and it's consistent with that comment that's in Article 9. Okay, the comment 4A has a discussion of the different kinds of goods. Great. Zach, right?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to do a very weak attempt to learn people's names. I've got this thing here. At the end of the semester, I guarantee you I will not remember your name. That's terrible, right? You can say on your evaluations, Professor Smith is a jerk because he will not remember my name. I have a brain defect. I can't, it's just really hard for me to learn names in big groups. Adam.
Yeah,
Next blank.
it's a good and it's a farm product.
Why is it a farm product?
Because in 910234 it specifically mentions livestock born or unborn.
It's that easy, right? If looking up the answer is the way you get the answer, I am totally okay with that being the way you got there. There's a definition for farm products that includes livestock in its definition. We're done. Yes?
Can I, okay, then later in the chapter, maybe we'll get to this later, but there was a case about like cows.
Yes.
And
So
they
let's talk
said-
about you. This is a great time to talk about it.
It said something like, the parties agree that cattle constitute goods, and they further agree that they are not farm products.
And why is that? And I think your next question is, I don't know.
I don't know, I know this.
Adam, do you have a sense of why in that case they were not farm products, but they were equipment?
They could have uses other than farm products.
So farm product is a very specific definition. It includes the definition of livestock, but in the case it's livestock. But it's not a farming operation. What was the guy doing in the case?
Yeah, it was like people were coming for,
It's City Slickers. If you ever saw that movie, it's the City Slickers cattle. They create these fake cattle drives, and people are like, yay, I'm a cowboy. And they go with the cattle, right? Is that being held for sale? Is it part of a farming operation? Is what that person's doing a farming operation? No. The definition of farm products says it has to be part of a farming operation, right? That's not a farming operation. If it's not a farming operation, what are the other possibilities? Could be inventory, right? It's not a farming operation, but the cattle's held by, I can't even figure out what this would be, but, Big Lots happens to have some cows on hand. There would be inventory. Or it could be a consumer product. I hug these every day, right? These are my comfort cows.
like a petting zoo? Like, I don't get that, I'm sorry.
No, but personal, right? A petting zoo at my house. Otherwise, if it's not at my house, if it's a petting zoo, what is it? It's this case. It's equipment. Right? Now, it says in the case, he sells them. The guy sold some of the cattle occasionally. He said, but that wasn't the primary use. The question is, in the hands of the debtor, at the time that we're creating the security interests, how are they using the goods? Yes?
I have a hypo that
Okay.
I would like an answer to. So, you know how like tractor
Do you have a potential answer? I'd love to hear what your analysis is.
Okay, I think I have an answer.
Okay.
So, you know like Tractor Supply around Easter, they have like little cute baby chicks?
Yes.
And like ducks and things? So in that case, would that be like inventory?
So who is selling them?
Tractor Supply.
Tractor Supply?
Yeah, it's like a
So
store.
they sell tractors, but on this occasion
Well,
they
it's
have.
like dog food.
What do you think?
I think it's inventory.
Yeah. Is it a farming operation?
No. Okay,
There you
thank
go.
you.
It's really that simple. Yeah. Not a farming operation, cannot be farming products, then it's either consumer goods, inventory, or equipment. If they're holding it for sale, inventory. If they're not holding it for sale and it's not a consumer good, it has to be equipment. Done. That's straightforward. Dimitri, you had a question.
This is kind of going off of our main point, but back to the petting zoo. So that's equipment because it's lasting for a long time? Instead
Yes.
of inventory?
Right? We're going to get to a definition of inventory where things get used up very quickly. And yeah, that's exactly right. The cattle last an extended period of time. Yeah. Great question. Yeah.
Like the thing that kind of made me wonder if it was inventory, because it said for sale, fattened by farmer for sale.
Yeah, but it said farmer, right?
Okay.
Farming operation.
Oh.
If I tell you Farmer Brown at his farm is farming livestock, I hope that that's enough to make you go, oh, it's a farm.
Even though he's going to sell it eventually.
And remember, in my lecture, one of the things they talked about is how farmers hold things for sale, but they have farming products. And then everybody else who holds stuff for sale, it's called inventory.
Okay.
So farmers sell stuff. So therefore, that's actually part of the aspect of it.
Okay.
There are other kinds of farming products that are not sold that are still farm products. We'll look a little bit more at the definition.
Okay, so whether the cow, or whether the livestock is for sale or it's just on farm, do you call it a farm product?
Yes, if it's involved, right? So take a look at the definition, right? Let's take a look. It says, farm products are goods other than standing timber with respect to which the debtor's engaged in, right? So we're asking, what is the debtor doing? If they're a farmer in a farming operations, then the things that they have that fall into the category crops produced, right? Crops grown or growing, livestock supplies or products of crops and livestock. Right? It's not that they're being held for sale, it's that the farmer is operating a farm. Yeah. Key to the definition. So again, I may very well ask a question where I have Farmer Bob has a farm where he has some cows that he farms. If you can't get that that's a farming operation, I can't help. Right?
But Farmer Bob's dog is a consumer good?
Great question. What does the dog do? What does the farmer do with the dog?
He plays with it.
Then it's a consumer good. Yeah. If we define the dog as a good, then it's a consumer good. Yes.
So if it herds, that
And it's probably part of. Then I would say it's a farming product.
the dog, if it herds
Well, or
cattle.
equipment. It could be
Equipment.
right. No, I would say it's a farming product. Right? It's either equipment or farming products, and farm products means goods other than standing timber with respect to which the debtor is engaged in a farming operation and which are. And then the question would be is it a supply used or produced, is it a supply used or produced in the farming operation? That dog might be equipment. It's not livestock, it's not a crop. Well, what's the tractor? Mackenzie, what's the tractor?
Equipment.
Yes, because it's not a supply. It is a long-term thing that exists for a period of time. That's not part of it's not like timber, not like livestock or crops, or supplies in making those things. Right, supplies. So what would be a supply? Feed, seeds, things like that.
Would hay be a supply?
I would
Or
say
would that be like a farm product? 'Cause
well,
then you get in the
you
ground.
feed hay to the cattle, right?
Yeah,
Or it's a crop.
yeah. Okay.
Both of those are farming products, farm products.
Yeah.
Oliver, next blank. I want to make sure before we move on that we're good with this. So we just talked about the tractor. The tractor is equipment. Everybody good with that? Okay. So the next one is the farmer's chickens.
I'll put that, I mean, it could be either farm product or consumer good, but I would say farm product.
Do you raise chickens on a farm?
Yeah. What if he doesn't like sell the chickens that he has?
Doesn't I don't think that it again, the way the definition works is it says, are they, right? Let's look at the definition again. It says, sorry, it was the previous page. Farm products, goods other than standing timber with respect to which the debtor is engaged in farming operations and which are crops, it's not a crop, livestock born or on board, including aquatic goods produced in an aquacultural operation. Is it livestock?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not cattle, but, you know, goats, if you raise goats, farming operation, farm products. Yeah. Mackenzie's counterexample was the chicks sold at a store. They would be inventory because it's not a farming operation. Yeah.
If you just had a chicken at your house.
You're out of your house. It's your.
Okay. That is just a good, it's just a consumer.
Yeah. Yes. Personal, family, or household use. Right? It's your comfort chicken. Yes, Jan.
So if a farmer has a chicken that lives in his house. He owns the chicken's eggs, he's not selling the chicken.
I would say that it's not a hard one. I would just say it's consumer goods because it's been being held for personal, family, or household purposes. Yeah. It's not part of the farming operation. It's a personal item. Yeah. Great. So that was the farmer's chickens. How about the farmer's manure? And that, James.
The inventory.
This is a crap answer, right? That's a good one, right? I gotta laugh. You're gonna remember this one now because you laughed. What is it?
I put inventory.
Ooh. Take a look at the definition of farm product. The last part, D. 9109, 9102,
34.
A34D.
So I guess it would be a farm product?
Is manure a product of livestock?
Mm-hmm.
There we go. Yay. Anybody have a problem with that? No, that's right. It comes out of the cattle. It's a product of the cattle. I agree. But so would calves, right? Calves would also be a product of the cattle, so therefore they would be a farm product as well, under that definition.
Does it matter if you're like selling it to another farmer?
Do farmers sell the stuff that they grow? So it's still a farm product. The fact that they sell it doesn't change the definition.
But what if they don't sell it? It doesn't matter either. Like if
Doesn't
they
matter.
use it to like
Doesn't
fertilize
matter.
crops.
Yeah, just like the supplies, right? The major kind of collateral that is farm products are crops and livestock. But then we have C and D, which are the supplies and the products as well. Yeah. Yes.
Okay, I think it's really gonna help me, and I'm sorry if it's annoying.
No.
So like, a farmer grows hops on their farm.
Yeah.
That's a farm product.
Yes.
Those hops are sold to a brewer as inventory to make beer.
Yes.
They're inventory in their warehouse. When
Yes.
it's made into beer, the beer is a consumer good.
If you buy it for your own personal
But it's
consumption.
inventory at the breweries.
Yes.
Okay, and so it can change.
Yes.
When
And
that's
now,
fine.
but understand, we're only asking this question once.
Okay.
For purposes of this class, when are we asking the question? When the security interest is created. At the time the security interest is created, what is the collateral? That's when we're asking the question. So it's going to be, if it's still at the farm, it's probably a farm product. Now, if it's wheat that's taken by the farmer, what do you call it? Collected. It's not really. Harvested by the farmer, and then the harvester makes beer. Is it a farm product or inventory?
I think it's still a farm product?
No. Once serious manufacturing processes are applied to the farm products, it shifts from farm product to something else.
To inventory?
Well, if they're going to sell it, yeah, or equipment.
Like in Hubers?
Yeah. So it's only sort of mostly in its natural state, is it a farm product? If there's a manufacturing process, then it's converted. And I think that we have a problem. So Keith, next blank.
Mobile home. Well, it's movable, so I'd say it's good.
Yes.
And then I'd say inventory, because the person's selling the mobile home.
Is there somebody selling it?
No, it just says mobile home.
All right. So you want to know who the debtor is?
Yeah.
Why?
Because I guess if I'm buying the mobile home, it's a consumer good.
Yep.
And if you're selling it, it's inventory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. Does everybody agree with that?
If you're operating like a business out of a mobile home, would it be equipment?
Again, so at the time that you're getting the security interest, you're using the mobile home for business purposes, not for personal living.
Yes, it would be equipment.
Yeah. Now, the mobile home gets attached to the land. Right? Not uncommon that mobile homes become non-mobile, right? Does that change it into real estate? It does. Yes. But until we have facts that say it's permanently attached, like they put in a slab and if it's a slab, it's still movable. But if they, build a basement underneath it, something like that, put in a foundation, then I would say now it's real estate. Okay. But that's why they say mobile home. That's movable. Cool. We're rocking and rolling here. Everybody feeling good about this? Just remember, manure is farm products. And it's the product of the cow. I'm just going to go back to that because I got to laugh. So. All right, so D.
Yes.
And Lucas, right?
Yes. A right to sue someone for breach of contract.
Right to sue someone for breach of contract is?
Would that be an instrument?
Okay. Why would it be an instrument?
Well, your contract would be a negotiable instrument.
Is it negotiable? All right, so first of all, is it a piece of paper? A right to sue someone for breach of contract, is that a piece of paper?
No.
So is it tangible?
No.
Okay, so it's not tangible. So we take it out of that quasi-tangible category. Is it goods?
No.
Okay, so it's gotta be an intangible. So what kind of intangible is it?
I guess, I mean, account would probably be the only.
And for it to be an account, it has to fit under the definition of 9102A2. So if we go to that definition, did we have a contract related to a right of payment of a monetary obligation, whether or not earned by performance, for property that has been sold, leased, licensed, or assigned, or services rendered or to be rendered? We don't know. We don't have that information. If it's that, then it's an account. If it's not that, what is it?
It would be excluded.
Well, if it's not an account, it has to fit in somewhere else. Where would it fit?
A general intangible?
Yeah, I think those are the two choices. And if you look at the definition of general intangible, we go now to 42. Any personal property, including things in action, which under old terminology is called a chosen action. And those are basically property rights where the only value comes from the right to sue about it. So a general intangible includes the bare right to sue somebody about something.
So is the payment intangible part of the general?
Yes, it is. It is. So payment intangible is a right to payment that relates to a general intangible. So the example I gave is a right to receive a licensing fee for a copyright. Would be a payment intangible and thus a general intangible. Yeah.
This is different than a commercial tort just because it was a contract.
Yes. Is a contract action a tort action? So that's why it's different. Yeah. Because torts are, under certain circumstances, excluded or included under a different category. Yeah. Good? Everybody feel good about that one? No, I have a question over here.
I was just like, I might have overthought it. but
Matthew,
like,
right? Yeah.
Yeah, if you like transfer like a contract to someone, aren't you transferring the rights, which includes the right to sue? I don't know if I was like overthinking it or, I don't know.
I'm trying to think of an example to answer your question. Right now, I don't want to overcomplicate it.
Yeah.
So just understand that the things in action idea, which is makes it a general intangible, is this property right in things whose only value comes from the ability to sue. That's what a thing in action is. Okay. Next blank. A right to sue someone for negligence arising out of an automobile accident.
So I said it was
And Peyton, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
I said it was a personal tort claim, not
Okay.
a commercial tort claim, and so it's not an Article 9 tort claim and not covered.
Okay. So it is let's take a look at a right to sue someone for negligence arising out of an automobile accident. Could it be a commercial tort?
I guess if it was if we had more information,
What would you want to know?
like who owned the automobile, like was it like a commercial entity, I guess?
And why does that make a difference?
Because then you're suing the company? Maybe?
Well, so who's collateral? So the question is there's a cause of action. So who owns the cause of action? And you're saying it depends on who owns the car.
Right,
So-
like if it's an organization.
And then what happens if it's an organization that owns the right to sue?
Then it counts as a general intangible?
No.
Oh.
Nope. Not a bad guess. It is an intangible. I agree with that. But what kind? It is a specific category of tort that is included as collateral, but as its own kind of collateral. Take a look at commercial tort claim. A13, 9102A13.
I mean, it says does not include damages arising out of personal injury.
So if it's a personal injury claim, then no.
Right.
Well, is that right? What is 13? Read the two parts. In order for it to be a commercial tort, what do you have to have? There's two ways it can be a commercial tort.
So the claimant is an organization.
One.
The claimant is an individual, and the claim arose in the course of business or profession and does not include damages arising out of personal injury or death.
Okay. So does Part A exclude personal injury claims? The way the statute is written. Either the claimant is an organization or the claimant is an individual, and it arises out of the claimant's business or profession and does not include personal injury. Does the personal injury restriction apply to organizations?
No.
Okay.
No.
Do businesses have personal injury claims?
No.
Typically not. Yeah. So you're never going to have a situation where the company is suing because the company was personally injured, because they can't be. They don't exist.
Sure.
All right? Yes, question in the back.
So is this not an
Emily, is that right? Yes.
Is this not an assignment?
Well, it doesn't say assignment, does it?
No, but it says 9109B12, so I don't know if that means an assignment that's not covered by Article 9.
A right to sue. Oh, I'm sorry, maybe they, yeah, D12 is, tort claims are not included unless it's a commercial tort.
Oh.
Right? 109D12, and we talked about that also, right? Is that if it's a personal injury claim of a person that is not a business, operating a business, it's excluded under 9109D12. Now we have, if it's owned by a business, it could be a commercial tort, but only for non-personal injury if it's an individual and then owned by an organization.
So,
Yes?
so if it's a business, it's a commercial tort claim, but if it's not, then it's not under Article 9?
Yes. That's essentially what. Tort claims are generally excluded, unless they're commercial torts, and then they're included. Yes?
Is it saying just the right to pursue the claim?
Yes.
Not the right to whatever the outcome, like?
We're not talking about the judgment, and we're not talking about the settlement.
Okay.
The settlement is a contract, the judgment is a judgment, which is not covered. We're just talking about the right to sue. And I guess think of it this way. You're a company, and the single most valuable thing you own is that someone did you wrong, did your company wrong, right? Your business has basically failed because somebody wrote a bad article about you. And so now what you have is a libel action against a publisher. But it's worth millions. But you have no operations, so you have no cash. Can you use that right to sue the newspaper as collateral for a loan? Yes, because it's a commercial tort, if it is a commercial tort. Does that make sense? It might have great value. Yes?
So like if, let's say like I just get into a car accident with another, just not a business, just another person,
No.
that would not be covered by Article 9.
D12.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. A right to sue a corporation for wooing away a trusted employee. And I'm sorry, that jumped. So we're comparing this is a tort. Now you're suing for tortious interference with commercial relations or something. Right?
I want to say it's a commercial tort claim. It reads like it's the claimant is an individual, and because it has to do with their employee, it should arise out of the course of their business or profession, and it doesn't include damages from personal injury or death of an individual.
You feel good about that?
I want to feel good about it, but you know.
Oh, come on, just say yes.
Sure, yeah.
You feel great about it. That was terrific analysis. All of you guys, this is good. You've been doing great. Perfect. That's exactly what that's why it's in here. Sounds like it's an individual that has a tort, but the tort relates to a business. And it's not personal injury, it's tortious interference with contractual relations. That might be the claim. Everybody good? Okay, commercial tort. Next blank is Sam.
I thought it was an intangible, and I thought it was an account, but I've been thinking about it, and it might be a general intangible.
Okay, because?
Because, let's see, including, the definition says, including, things.
Yep. Can't be an account if it's a general intangible, that's right.
I mean, it includes, like, you can receive payment, includes a payment intangible.
So is this a right to receive payment that relates to a general intangible? It's a contract right, right? But it's the settlement of a dispute over a contract right, right? So the settlement is a contract. So I think it's a payment intangible that relates to a general intangible, it's a general intangible. I think your analysis is spot on. Good. You guys are doing great. I feel like you don't have confidence in your answers. But you're seeing how we do this analysis, okay? We're just reading through the statute. What does it say? Apply it to the facts as given, okay? Ross,
Yep.
next
So,
blank.
For here, it's a good, and it falls under equipment. If it's not inventory to be used for sole, it's not a consumer good.
So this is the pencils and other stationery.
Pencils and other stationery.
Okay, so let's take a look at the definition of inventory. And just make sure that you still agree after you read that one. Take a look at definition of inventory and 48D.
Taxes of raw material and work in progress for materials to be used or consumed as
Inventory. So the difference between equipment and inventory is the amount of time that the thing will last. And if it's used up in the course of operations, normal operations, it's inventory. But if it lasts for a long time, then it's equipment. And I'll take you back to the comment 4. And if you look at, so it's the 1, 2, 3, 4th paragraph at the end. The last couple of sentences describes the difference. So take a second and look at that. Comment 4 to 102, 4A. In the 4th paragraph, it describes the difference between equipment and inventory. All right? Otherwise, I agree with you. If it's not used up, then could you have a mechanical pencil that an artist would use for years? Would that be equipment or inventory?
equipment.
Yeah, yeah, because it's not used up. The lead they put in the pencil, equipment or inventory? Yes. So if you're an artist and you have brushes and things like that that you don't throw away very often, right? You use them over and over again, equipment.
So
But
the printer is equipment, but the paper.
there you go. The printer is equipment, the paper is inventory.
Can you repeat what the answer was? I guess I wasn't paying attention.
Okay, so it's inventory.
Okay.
So take a look at the comment 4A to section 9-102. All right, next one, liquor license. What do you think? And Natalie, right?
I think it's a general intangible.
And why is that?
Well, that's sort of the catch-all definition, and I know it's not a quasi-intangible because you can't really transfer a liquor license.
Owning the piece of paper that grants the liquor license doesn't transfer ownership of the liquor license, right? You gotta apply to the city and have permission for it to be transferred. So paper doesn't represent the interest. Great, so it's not a quasi-tangible. And why not account or one of the other quasi-tangibles?
I don't think it really fits the other categories, so you just go with the general catch-all.
Yes. Liquor license is a general intangible. I want you to pause 1 second and think about that. If you grant a security interest in a general intangible, and just use that word, general intangible, it covers a lot of stuff. A lot of very important intangible forms of property fall under the category of general intangible. And you don't have to specifically describe them, you just call them general intangibles. And the next thing you know, your liquor license is pledged to the bank, even though you didn't even think about it. Equipment I'm not as worried about. I don't think debtors really understand the consequences of the term general intangible. It's very broad. Yes?
What value would the bank get from a liquor license?
Well, it's a great question. Can they foreclose on it? That's a separate issue. Do they have a security interest? That's where we are today. Whether that security interest results in a foreclosure of any value, no, they may not. The city may say, don't care. You don't get to operate the bar. But they could, right? They could say, because you have a security interest and you've now repossessed it from the owner of the bar, they could say, we've terminated the liquor license for the bar and you can transfer it to somebody else if you want. It depends on the rules outside of Article 9. All right, good. Next blank. We did the liquor license. Now, right to the return of a security deposit held by a landlord. Lexi.
Yes. So I said it was an account, possibly, or then a general intangible, so I'm between those two.
And is it why would you exclude it from account? What would cause you to say it's not really an account? Because it is an obligation to pay money, and account includes that idea. But then there's these subcategories. It's not for the sale of goods. It's not for the performance of services, right? You're just letting the person in the building. You're not doing their taxes. It doesn't fall under any of the other subcategories, right? So it's not an account. Doesn't fit into the other categories, so therefore it fits into the catch-all, so general intangible. I agree with your analysis. Everybody good with that one? All right, next blank. Dylan.
Newspaper carriers' rights to payments already delivered. I said that would be an account, because it would be the right to the payment for the monetary obligation as to goods.
So it's an account?
Yeah.
Agree with that. All right, everybody agree? That one's pretty straightforward. You're selling newspapers, they haven't paid you, it's an account. All right. Mitchell. They're not yet delivered.
They're not yet delivered. I said it would still be, I think it would still be an account in this case because it's gonna be for services to be rendered.
Yep.
You haven't delivered yet, but you're going to.
Yes, I agree with that, right? For services to be rendered. Yes. Okay, so we're rocking along here, right? So we've done liquor license, and now the curtains bought by a lawyer for the law office. So, Janet.
I have here that it is a equipment because they're gonna be long lasting and they were bought for commercial purposes.
What about the fact that they're used later? If they were used later, doesn't the problem say he brings them home? Does that change your analysis?
Well, at the time, we're looking at the time that the security interest was created, so when he bought them, it was for commercial purposes.
Exactly right. So let's just take a second to talk about the case. It's Troop, or is that the name of it? Henry Troop. So they have this tractor, and the question is it consumer goods or is it equipment? So they're operating a farm as a side venture. What are the key facts to the court in that case? One, that they checked consumer good and they did not check business. And two, it was a side venture. It was not their main employment. So it sounds like, and the farm never made money, as I recall, right? So at the time that they executed the security agreement and created the security interest, it was equipment. It was consumer goods. It was consumer goods. And we don't care what happened later. Even if they did quit their jobs and start farming, it doesn't change what it was originally. It was consumer goods. In the case, it was important because a security interest in consumer goods does not need to have a filing in many cases. Whereas if it's equipment, you always have to file. So that was the big difference. The security interest is not perfected if it's equipment, but it is perfected if it's consumer goods, which we will learn in the next few classes, okay? Next blank. Aunt Augusta loaned her nephew $5,000 with an oral agreement. So, Kelly, what do you think?
So that would be intangible, I guess. Payment intangible?
Sorry?
Payment intangible?
Yeah, payment intangible, which falls under the category of general intangible. Is there any, did she receive in return a promise to perform or do some kind of act or provide goods? No, so it's not an account. It's just a bare promise to pay. And is there a promissory note?
It doesn't say that.
Says it's oral, right?
Right.
Are oral promises to pay enforceable? Yes. They're not subject to the statute of fraud, so you don't need a piece of paper. If they had a piece of paper, what would it be? Would it be a general intangible if there was a promissory note? No, then it would be an instrument. Yeah. So it's just the bare promise to pay with an oral promise to pay. We good about that one? We're rocking and rolling here. Okay. Next blank. Patents, trademarks, and copyrights. Greg.
Be a general intangible.
Since I already said that.
Yeah.
That's not fair. You don't get to. How about the next one? Finish up lottery winnings.
That's an account.
Why?
Well, in definition, it includes lottery winnings.
Yeah. They just chose. They just said, we're gonna make lottery winnings accounts. So that's it, that's the answer. It's that simple. If it weren't in 9102A2, it would probably be a general intangible. But they, by definition, just said lottery winnings are accounts. All right? Okay, we did the tube case. So now we're moving on to question 18. Mercy Hospital needs financing and calls you. All right, the hospital always has a large number of such receivables. When the hospital borrows money, can it use the monies due from the various health plans as collateral? I'll just throw this out to the group. What is the answer?
Yes.
And what is it? Type of account, right? Healthcare receivable, right? Now, just keep an eye on 9109 D8. Many types of insurance are excluded, but healthcare receivables are specifically included as accounts. And the reason is that there's actually they're bought and sold in business, so they wanted to make sure they fell under Article 9. All right, number 19. Passport credit card. When Passport needs money to borrow money, can it use these credit card transactions as collateral?
Yes.
And what are they? It's in the definition. It's one of the subcategories of the kinds of obligations to pay. That was easy, right? Those two, just they're unusual things that we wouldn't think of as accounts, but they are because they are just included by definition, just like the lottery. Okay, problem 20. Fill in the blanks. Milk in the hands of the farmer.
Farm products.
Products of the cow, therefore farm products. All right. How about at the grocery store?
Inventory.
Okay, good. We're straightforward. And then, how about in the hands of the grocery store's customer who's buying it for consumption? We're rocking this. That's easy. Would your answer to the second question change if it were a restaurant?
Yeah.
What is it if it's a restaurant? Why is it inventory? Yeah, it's used up in the operation of the business, therefore it's inventory.
Well,
Yes?
it also depends, like if you're buying a glass of milk, will that be?
So they could be selling it, then it would be inventory easily. Or if they're using it in baking or making the food, then it's also inventory. It's inventory either way because it's either used up quickly or, right?
Okay. Okay.
Okay? How about a CD? Oh,
Sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
Understand that one, because if a restaurant,
You want it to be equipment.
oh, sorry, I think I was thinking if you buy it from the restaurant.
Yeah. If you buy it as a consumer, then it's consumer goods. If at the time you bought it, you're immediately granting a security interest. It's a ridiculous idea, but it could happen. Could happen. It's not impossible. More likely, it's the restaurant's using it in their business, and it doesn't matter whether they're selling it or they're using it up in their making of food. Either way, it's inventory. Okay. CD accounts. Is there a kind of account that is a bank account?
Deposit account?
Okay. Why? How is a CD different from a deposit account? Does anybody know?
You can just go in and get your money back, you have to wait.
And is there a document that represents the CD? And the problem says, what if it's transferable? What is it? Instrument, yes. Most bank accounts are deposit accounts. So your checking account, your savings account, your time account, whatever they call them, the one weird little kind of account that could be transferable is called a CD, and if it's transferable, it could be an instrument. Could be an instrument. Everybody good with that one?
So was it instrument?
If it's transferable.
So
I would say it's either a deposit account, if it's just, if they call it a CD, but it's just like a savings account, or if it's a CD that's transferable, then I think it's an investment, it's a, sorry, it is a, yeah. Yeah, an instrument. How about those two kinds of receipts? The air bill. What's that?
Document.
It's a document. Now remember, document has a definition. It's not just any piece of paper that has words on it. It's a particular kind of piece of paper that has specific words on it. So when you hand stuff over to the carrier, it's called a,
Warehouse receipt?
well, are they a warehouse? It's a bill of lading. Okay? If you deliver to a carrier, the carrier issues a bill of lading. If you deliver to a warehouse, the warehouse issues a warehouse receipt. But it doesn't matter, they're both documents. Okay? They're technically a little bit different in who you're delivering it to, bill of lading versus warehouse receipt, but both of those are documents. And I have classes over, and I have a meeting I have to go to, and we have some problems that will start at the beginning of next time. And if we get further behind, I may ask us to come in a little bit on a Friday. We'll see. Hopefully we can get through it quick.
What do you want to eat for lunch?
See, I cannot take questions out. I really